Hello and welcome to Everfree Radio. I'm your host, Brushin Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
And I'm Socksy.
And today we are bringing you our review of Season 3, Episode number 3, Too Many Pinkie Pies. And already I am dreading the episode.
Really? I'm looking forward to it.
Well, our episode opens with Twilight practicing her magic. She is attempting to answer an age-old question, apparently, about changing apples to oranges and whether or not it can be done.
See, I think right away at the very start we can already see an improvement from moving from the first two seasons to Season 3 in that there's a lot more detail in the animations, especially in the magic animations, with the swirling purple beams of light around the apple.
I can definitely see that. I gotta say, there was something that was standing out about this animation that kind of, it seemed, I don't know if it's because I was used to the animation of the previous episodes, the previous seasons, but for some reason the animation seemed off to me, and I think it was like, I can't really explain it, some weird contrast between the ponies themselves and the background, and the fluidity of the motion in the animation. I can't really explain it, but I got this weird feeling when it came to the animation this episode. Not really a negative feeling, like everything looks great. The animation's very fluid, very, very pretty to look at, but something just felt off.
Felt great to me. I see a lot of improvements in the animation. Everything's flowing a lot faster and a lot smoother, but I was again too focused on the flying orange.
Yeah, flying orange. Yeah, that's what happens when Pinkie interrupts your spell, right? Next thing we know, we're going to have Pinkie interrupting a spell, and we're going to have them all in an alternate universe version where everybody's a guy.
Or they'll have a body swap episode.
So, Pinkie interrupted Twilight's little spell to turn apples into oranges, which leaves us with a lovely little orange bird, who I am sure wants to scream, but unfortunately has no mouth. Pinkie interrupted the spell, and she's eager to have lots and lots of fun. We also realize that Pinkie's limbs are basically the same as taffy, and she could do whatever the heck she wants with them. And Rarity pops in, black cloak covering something or other. I got this feeling almost like Rarity was a vampire trying to shield herself from the sunlight. But she throws it off to reveal her lovely dress that she made today. And Pinkie goes on about Rarity doing fun things while she wasn't around, and wonders if other friends of hers are doing fun things while she's not around, and she's missing out on a whole bunch of fun.
I do think it's interesting that Rarity would wear a cloak over that beautiful dress she's made, because it is quite beautiful.
Well, she clearly wanted it to be a surprise.
Yeah, just for the purposes of it being a surprise to her friends, though. Whereas she could be flaunting it around town on the way there.
Well, Rarity does have that very over-the-top and bombastic personality where it's like, I want everything to be this big melodramatic reveal, so I can see where she would deliberately go and be like, I'm gonna hide this and then show it off as a big surprise because it's so amazing and I'm so amazing.
It wouldn't have had the same effect if she was just walking around with it flowing, like showing to everybody.
I suppose. You can't spell Rarity without melodrama. Wait.
So Pinkie, realizing that a bunch of her other friends could be doing fun things while she's not around, decides to run off, encountering Rainbow Dash, who is attempting to beat some discipline into that heavy cloud making fog, and Pinkie takes care of that right away.
Rainbow
Applejack,
Dash
who's
was having
toting
fun without her.
Applejack, who's toting some apples along in a cart, while Apple Bloom sits in the back with the apples. I love how Pinkie Pie decides to join her friends for these so-called fun moments, and she literally spends like all of 20 seconds with her friends, just like, hi, I'm gonna really quickly like grab some fun to go, you know?
A fun injection.
Fun size fun.
One thing I noticed about this episode is that, going back to the Rainbow Dash fog incident, that Pinkie Pie is referred to as somewhat of a hurricane throughout the entire episode. It's almost as if it's a continual theme through the episode. Pinkie Pie is like a storm
She's a storm.
Yeah.
She's a storm of fun.
And she's really, really fast, too, as we see as she's zipping along. She's got the whole Speedy Gonzales Roadrunner flash thing going on, going from one point. So it was so fast she can run, in fact, that she is capable of completely dissipating the fog that Rainbow Dash was trying to beat into submission and get from one point to another in lightning speed.
Category 5, Fun Cane. Funnado. A Funquake.
So Pinkie goes from Rainbow Dash to Applejack and then finally arrives at Fluttershy, all tuckered out, asks Fluttershy if she's doing anything fun. Oh, not particularly. Oh, that's good, because fun's hard. Collapse. And opening title theme.
I had fun once, it was terrible.
You know, it strikes me as odd. The pony who can probably have a party for every day of the week, for every month of the year, would actually be worn out by fun.
Yeah, well, you know, she's only... Well, I was about to say she's only human, but she's only mortal. That's what I'll use. I'll just say mortal.
I don't know.
You know?
Some of the things we've seen these ponies do, it makes me question if they're mortal or not.
They may be made of dark matter, but they're still mortal.
I guess you still get tired if they run several miles, well, sprint several miles in a couple seconds.
So we open back up on the episode with Pinkie Pie enjoying this odd sofa setup with a bunch of butterflies swarming around her. Apparently it's Fluttershy's.
See, it looks very similar to the fainting couch of rarities. But
Yeah, it
just
does look
slightly
like the
different
fainting
color.
couch.
I'm not sure how this is supposed to work with the butterflies. I guess, do they, like, fill you with a good feeling or something?
They fill you with joy and butterfly kisses.
It's akin to the feeling you get by being surrounded by kittens.
I don't know. If I had that many kittens surrounding me, I'd be kind of concerned that it was time for the kitten revolution.
Well, Pinkie's enjoyed a nice little bit of relaxation on this butterfly couch, and I gotta note that as she's going on about this, that, and the other, about the discovery that people can be having fun while she's not there, like this is a earth-shattering event. Between this and the Crystal Empire episodes, we got a lot of ponies standing on their hind legs, because Pinkie in this scene, she's standing on her hind legs on the couch, even throwing her back over the back of the couch, all melty like she's some kind of dolly clock.
Obviously, ponies are boneless.
I wonder if this is something that we're going to be seeing a lot more of in these later seasons as we get further and further away from season 1. The season in particular that was actually directed by Lauren Faust, because one of the big things we had a lot of emphasis on in the very first season was ponies not doing anything that wouldn't be anatomically correct, you know. Limited amounts of standing on their hind legs, none of that using their hooves as if they were hands, and trying to find interesting ways for ponies to do things while still being physically believable.
But honestly, I think the ponies on hind legs thing, it was a lot less noticeable in this episode, at least for me. I think it's not going to be a very prevalent thing, it's just something they have the capability of doing. I guess the ponies in this universe just have a better sense of balance than, well, other animals.
It's magic. They don't gotta explain anything.
Well, and it's mostly just a comparative sort of comment, you know. Comparatively speaking, I've been seeing more standing on the hind legs in this than in the previous episodes in season 1 and such.
They use giant mushrooms as tables. They can stand on their hind legs all they want.
Although there was that one part in Bridal Gossip when Pinkie stood on her hind legs for quite a while after the end of a Evil Enchantress song. Lots of dancing on her hind legs too, actually. You know, forget I said anything. But Pinkie decides to go ahead and hang out with Rainbow Dash and Applejack at 2 separate events, but they're both in the afternoon, and she realizes she's going to have to do some serious training if she wants to be there on time at each point. Specifically speaking, she has to manage to figure out how to get from the watering hole where Rainbow Dash has invited her to spend the afternoon relaxing by the swimming hole and taking in some rays and just chilling. And Applejack, whose family's doing a barn raising that afternoon. And it'll probably take a while. So she has to figure out how to run between the swimming hole and Applejack's farm and manage to cut like 20 whole minutes off of her time.
One thing I noticed that's very noteworthy here is that they managed to avoid the whole dilemma of two friends wanting to do the same thing with a third-party friend at the same time, in that both Rainbow Dash and Applejack just seemed to brush it off when Pinkie had to choose between one of them. It actually seemed the very mature thing for them to do.
Well, yeah, we didn't get the cliche bit where in a lot of cartoons that have had this sort of setup, we don't get the cliche bit where the friends start fighting over the person. We don't get Rainbow Dash trying to pressure Pinkie Pie into going to the swimming hole, and we don't get Applejack trying to pressure Pinkie Pie into coming to the barn raising. They just say, hey, the option's open, you can do whatever you feel like, just figured we'd toss you out the invitation.
And I think for that, at least the writers deserve some recommendations. Bleh.
Props.
I'm pretty sure they already learned that lesson with the golden ticket thing.
Well,
a similar
that was a little different, I think, though.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so major props to Dave Polsky, the writer of this episode, for managing to avoid the cliche in that particular instance, and having this be a just singularly Pinkie Pie-oriented dilemma, where we have to deal with specifically Pinkie Pie's thoughts on the matter and her wanting to be able to spend as much fun time as possible with her friends. So, when Pinkie Pie is seen by Twilight attempting to basically break through into the Speed Force by racing at top speeds between the swimming hole and Sweet Apple Acres, Twilight basically jokingly says, oh, well, there's no way you're going to be able to do the whole barn raising thing and hang out with Rainbow Dash at the swimming hole, not unless there's two of you. And this reminds Pinkie Pie of an old story that her Granny Pie used to tell her.
When she was a little filly and the sun was going down?
No, not that one. Different nursery rhyme this time, and not done to music, which was a little surprising, but not an entirely negative thing. Pinkie's had a lot of songs throughout the series.
What I do find amusing is that in this episode, as you can obviously tell from the episode title, Too Many Pinkie Pies.
I find this frog amusing.
Despite the amount of Pinkie Pies, there was not one song.
This frog is the most amusing thing.
You're just going to go on and on about that frog.
It has leaves on it. It has leaves on its head.
It is not a frog, it is a frorange. It is a frorange.
Well, the frorange can open the
open its gaping maw, revealing the orange insides that really shouldn't count as a mouth,
I wonder if it
but
can spit
somehow
seeds
is.
out of its face.
Well, after we pass through that little scene, we get to Pinkie wandering through what appears to be the darker, foggier portion of the Everfree forest with lots of scary, prickly brambles. And she says the rhyme aloud as she attempts to figure out where this secret little place she's attempting to get to is, going through the bramble bushes and such, till she winds up falling rather ungracefully down a hole, Looney Tunes style, as it goes up and down and around, and plops her out at an underground spring.
And she breaks her face.
You know, what makes me curious is that Pinkie obviously had this knowledge of this pool for a very long time. How'd she manage to go this long without exploring it before?
Well, she probably just took it more as just a nursery rhyme than anything else until the need arose that she had a specific reason to try and find out whether or not it was real.
She got desperate. Took desperate measures.
Desperate times call for desperate measures.
Desperate measures result in thousands of Pinkie Pies, so never do them.
So and I gotta say, I got having played Skyrim, and I play a lot of Skyrim. This little area reminds me a lot of the what's it called now? I'm having a hard time. The Falmer Undercity that's beneath the mountains in the underground. All the glowing mushrooms and the.
I'm too busy staying far away from Falmer.
Yeah, I can't remember. I can't remember the name of it right now. I'm sure someone will remind me in the comments. But flora and fauna, of the area, with the blue and green sea foamy color schemes and the mushrooms, reminds me a lot of that particular place.
Reminds me of Dear Esther.
Never played Dear Esther.
It had a scene like that. It was amazing.
So Pinkie Pie approaches the spring, or pond, I guess. I don't know. Would this be what, an underground well, spring, pond?
I think it's a spring. I believe it's stated as a spring.
Yeah, I think it is.
So she does a little rhyme, and voila! Out pops a second Pinkie Pie. This Pinkie Pie, however, seems to be incredibly single-minded. Single-minded to the point to where she continuously hops up and down, reiterating the same word. Fun.
It makes me curious as to how the clone's brain is formed, and that if it's based on what you're thinking at the time of entering the pool, because obviously Pinkie needs the clone for more fun, or if it's based around a single aspect of the person using it, i.e. Pinkie's biggest aspect is having fun.
Yep, fun and laughter and all that sort of thing.
Or perhaps their desire for, what their desire is when they enter the pool.
Yeah, that's what I said.
You might have to be thinking of a particular reason why you want to bring out another pony. But now I'm also curious too, because the rhyme is gender specific. It's gender specific for females, so I'm kind of curious, would you be able to create a clone of yourself if you were a stallion or a colt who went down to the little wellspring and attempted to make a clone?
It's also entirely possible that there is a version of the rhyme for a male pony, and
possibly.
Maybe if you use the wrong gendered version, you'd pop out with a female version of yourself if you're a male.
Oh, great!
That's
now
how
we're gonna have
we're
gonna have a bunch of fan fiction where a Colt goes down to make a clone of himself, but uses the female nursery rhyme and winds up with a female alternate, a female counterpart.
That's how the alternate reality happens.
Well, hey, I've spawned some fanfic. Achievement unlocked.
There you guys go. Fanfic authors, for all of you listening, go ahead, write it. Snips or snails go down to the wellspring and attempt to use it, but they wind up creating female counterparts of themselves.
Men don't get sung nursery rhymes. We're too manly and too busy doing manly things. Being manly men.
Too busy doing manly things, like being the background characters.
Like getting chased by an Ursa Minor?
Yep. Manly man things.
Actually, in this show, being the ones who do the manly things basically does amount to being the background characters.
Yep.
Manly Australian pony with shark on butt.
After leaving the little spring and the Everfree forest as a whole, Pinkie decides she's got her double, and it's time for us to go and have some fun. So she tells her double to go to Applejack's and go do the barn raising with Applejack and make sure to memorize and relay as much as she can to her after the end of the day when they meet back up at this particular spot, as if she had been there herself, because, they're both Pinkie Pie. And meanwhile, the original is going to go ahead and hang out with Rainbow Dash over at the swimming hole.
It was at this point that I noticed something that I've been thinking probably for quite a while now, is that when characters in the show tend to go a bit crazy or there's something wrong with them, their eyes are always the first thing to give it away, because as you notice, when the clone Pinkie Pie is hopping along, her eyes go a bit... not...
Googly moogly?
Yes. Thank you for clearing that up.
It's a technical term.
But yes, it's always the eyes to go first, because think back to previous episodes. Lesson 0, Party of 1. The eyes are always the first thing to go.
Yeah.
Something I noticed was that Rainbow Dash is reading a Daring Do book, and I believe it says Serpent Spire on it.
Does it? Let's see. I don't know.
I can't actually tell myself, but I'm sure there's somebody who's enlarged a screenshot to find out.
It's
Wait,
either
no?
Serpent's...
Sapphire Stone.
Sapphire
Stone.
I don't know. Is it Sapphire Stone?
Sapphire Stone, yep.
Okay, so Daring Do and the Sapphire Stone.
Daring Do and the Quest something Sapphire Stone.
I'm sure someone out there, some fanfic author, is going to defictionalize that story, just like how the Griffin's Goblet got defictionalized.
Give me all the credit.
I do think that was a beautiful little continuity nod there.
Yeah, I do like the continuity there. That she's just chilling, reading a Daring Do book.
Rainbow glasses.
Couldn't possibly be any other ones though, because other books other than Daring Do are for eggheads.
I think Rainbow at this point probably is a little more... She just needs a little bit of a nudge to get into other books.
Also rainbow glasses, that is all.
Rainbow glasses.
Well, she was intending to sunbathe, so... You generally go sunbathing with sunglasses.
So, we know that ponies sunbathe now, despite having fur coats, so there's really no point to attempting to get a tan.
Maybe that's their skin.
No, we know his fur, because in a previous episode where Snips and Snails have their fur cut off, we actually see their skin.
And Rarity comments about her coat being messed up in a Dog and Pony show when the Diamond Dogs are being too rough.
You get your logics out of this Pinkie Pie episode, yeah.
Don't you use your fancy mathematics to muddy the issue?
Crazy people muddying my Pinkie Pie episodes.
So, Pinkie is enjoying some fun time with Rainbow Dash, and Rainbow is herself just going to kind of relax on her bathing chair, and she tells Pinkie to maybe keep her fun a little quiet, and so Pinkie decides to do it and exhibits her own little physics-breaking superpowers as she quietly dives into the water, even going so far as to slow the effects of gravity on her person and sink into the water slowly and quietly.
Now, I do think this was one of the strongest parts of this episode was the humor in it. That part, I literally keeled over laughing at that part, because that's how Pinkie.
Well, I just think it's funny because in several occasions in the past when Pinkie has used some sort of reality warping ability or is tapped on the fourth wall in any case, the characters didn't notice it. But in this episode, Rainbow Dash actually looks at her and was like, how did you do that?
She had the same expression on her face that I did and the same reaction. She went, what?
Okay, so we cut to Fluttershy, who's picking berries with her friends, including Angel Bunny, and she spies Pinkie Pie going off, and eagerly going up to Pinkie Pie, she says, "Oh, I know I promised I wouldn't have any fun today because you're busy, but I couldn't help myself. All of the woodland critters and I decided to have a picnic. Would you like to join us?" Well, Double Pinkie Pie is left in quite a conundrum, because she was supposed to go and have fun at Applejack's, but this woodland critter tea party looks like a whole lot of fun too.
And how can you say no to those little ducklings and their big, gigantic,
and that
soulless
big
eyes?
old bear drinking from a tiny little teacup?
And that ferret. Is that a ferret? Or is that a possum? I think it's a possum.
I don't know.
I don't know. They're both rodents.
And we get another little meta joke as well here, where when Pinkie Pie, or the Doubles Pinkie Pie, realizes that she's got two different options for lots and lots of fun, but she can't choose between the two of them, the camera slowly starts zooming in as she starts to have a panic attack, and she comments, "The walls are closing in," and then it cuts back out to a wide shot, and Fluttershy comments that there aren't any walls closing in. Pinkie, what's going on?
Pinkie,
I
you're
actually
weird.
didn't notice that joke the first time around.
Also, she refers to Applejack as Applejohn.
Again, humor is easily one of the strongest points of this episode, and the names that the clone Pinkie Pie manages to come up with, Fluttershy, Applesauce, Applejohn, again, had me cracking up.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a running gag in this particular thing that the clones can't seem to get names down very well. So, the original and the double meet back up at the assigned place, and the original is going on and on, saying, "Oh, hey, I want details. And, well, actually, I should say that the double finds the original at the swimming hole, and then says, "I need to talk to you." And it's like, okay. And then Rainbow Dash, who has just finished getting an explanation of how Pinkie Pie has cloned herself in order to achieve maximum fun time, and has looked skeptic at first, sees both Pinkies go bouncing off and is kind of like, "What?" It just kind of shakes it off. You could probably just see it in her head, her just going, it's Pinkie Pie.
She did just wake up, so I figure she's thinking she's dreaming. Just goes back to
I
sleep.
Yeah,
do love-
possibly.
I do love that despite all the wacky, crazy adventures they've been on in the past, this time around, despite what Pinkie has said, it's just Pinkie being Pinkie.
It's just Pinkie Pie being Pinkie Pie.
She blinked 2 different eyelids at separate times.
So Pinkie Pie, the original, asks the double about how much fun the barn raising was, going on asking such things as if they raised it fast or slow or anything like that. And the double finally gets out that she couldn't go see the barn raising because Fluttershy, and then Pinkie Pie corrects her, invited her to do a woodland critter tea party, and how could she refuse? But at the same time, she was going to go to that awesome barn raising at Applejack, correction, once again, by the original. And then the double breaks into sobs about not being able to spend any time having fun because she was so distraught at having to choose between 2 options. So the original, thinking on her hooves, says, "Oh, that's okay. We'll just make more of us so that we can have more fun."
This can only end in tears.
Another thing I noticed throughout this episode is that the clones seem to have heightened emotions, because you can see when she's on the floor crying about missing Applejack's barn raising, which happens later in the episode again for some reason, that she just starts crying over basically missing a little event that's not really going to affect much of her friendship, if any of it.
But she's gonna miss out on fun.
Yeah, I think it's more about the fact that the clones are so focused on having fun that if they're going to miss out on fun, it completely shatters their perception, it completely ruins their entire day, and they just get miserable about it. So they decide to go back to the spring and pop up a couple of new Pinkie Pies. And then those Pinkie Pies turn right back around and start popping up some more.
And then more.
And then they go and they make some more.
And then they make more.
And oh gosh, now we've got like 20, 30 Pinkie Pies. Well, Pinkie Pie,
I can't handle all these Pinkie Pies.
the original, isn't one to be to balk at such a daunting figure, and says, "Now there's plenty enough Pinkie Pies to cover every inch of Ponyville." And so she marches them out of the spring and towards the village. And she even gives them a really quick pop quiz on the names that they need to remember.
I like those little drawings, though.
Going back to the scene where the clones are cloning themselves rather than the original doing it, it reminds me of a scene from The Simpsons in one of their Halloween specials, in which an event very similar to this has happened. And I'm not sure if it's either a very sly reference or just coincidence, but It just brought it up as a memory for me.
And with our theories of how the clones' minds work, if each clone Pinkie Pie is like thoroughly enamored with the prospect of fun, does it create a feedback loop that makes the next one want fun even more, and then keep that going on and on and on until it's horrible in the end?
It certainly could explain the insanity of some of the clones, yes.
We need to abort. We've gone too deep. So she makes even more Pinkie Pies, and they prepare to go off to Ponyville and have themselves some fun. Well, the first batch of clones decides to go and have some fun with Rainbow Dash, who...
She reacts as expected.
Well, pretty much decides to set up her chair and umbrella as a defensive perimeter while she fights back all of the clone Pinkie Pies who are going around just completely acting crazy, banging on drums and reusing other various different animations from previous episodes and previous seasons.
To be fair, Bones, if you saw that amount of Pinkie Pies acting quite crazy as Pinkie Pie does, I think you'd have the same reaction as Rainbow Dash.
Oh yeah, I would definitely be trying to set up some way of defending myself. So we cut to Applejack's Apple Family barn raising. We also get to see Apple Fritter again and another stallion who I do not recognize helping out with the barn raising in this case. And a bunch of Pinkie Pies come up, and wouldn't you know it, they're so ridiculously over the top and destructive in their fun having that they, what else, destroy the barn before it can be raised.
There's one dancing in front of the barn. Just dancing.
I'd just like to bring up the fact of that stallion that we see on the other side of Apple Fritter. I believe we've seen him before in the last roundup, because you see the guitar cutie mark he has, and I distinctly recall a pony at the rodeo in the last roundup having that cutie mark.
It's possible that we saw him. So, the original Pinkie Pie happens to be at this particular barn raising event, and Applejack turns and looks at her and says, "I need to know who's responsible for all of these Pinkie Pies destroying our barn so I can give them a piece of my mind." And Pinkie says, "You look awfully busy. We better go," and runs off. Applejack, being, angry at the fact that all of that day's work just got shoved down the drain, throws her hat down in frustration and shouts at the original.
And there's still that Pinkie dancing in front of that barn. Even though it falls down over her, the window falls over her, and she just dances. She just keeps dancing.
And the weight of the entire situation seems to be striking the original Pinkie Pie as she hides behind a haystack, and tears well up in her eyes as she realizes, "Oh no, my clones are ruining my friend's stuff."
I think it's safe to say the weight of this situation is now heavier than a broken barn.
No.
Ouch.
You broadsided me with that.
That was painful. You wound me, Crescendo. Your puns, it's so nice to hear them again.
Oh, you missed me.
So we get a cut to outside of the library, where Twilight is addressing what seems to be a good majority of Ponyville, if not the entire village, about, apparently, Pinkie Pie storming through the village and destroying everyone's stuff. Rarity herself describes it as being a hurricane.
Pinkie Cane.
I'd like to note at this point that all of the ponies have finally learned that the pony to turn to, the pony that's most reliable in situations like this, is Twilight. It only took them a few seasons.
Well, she is the one who's best at organizing and planning things, so...
Yep.
I think that pretty much after Winter Wrap-Up, they've been coming to Twilight with most of the issues, so... They're trying to figure out a method of fixing the issue with all the clone Pinkies, looking through their shelves and shelves of books, and Twilight mentions the nursery rhyme that Pinkie told her about earlier in the day, and as they're digging through, Spike just happens to move a few books and see an odd little horseshoe at the back of one particular shelf.
Why is it even there?
Turns out to be a button. He pushes... It would figure that they would just happen to find this particular little thing in this particular episode on this particular day during this particular event.
It does strike me as odd, though, that a library would have that kind of secret cub hole. Why is it there?
Strikes me as odd that Twilight would leave those spider webs there. And why is that cupboard there?
Clearly, it's an important tome of some kind describing magical locations and artifacts, because it knows about the spring, and it even knows a counterspell to get rid of the stuff. But that's jumping ahead. Pushing the button, the wall lifts up, revealing a hidden little shelf with a book on it, and the book inside details the nature of the location of the spring and what it does, and a counterspell to send the clones back. But there's a catch. If they shoot the spell at the real Pinkie Pie, she will also be sent back to wherever the clones go, back in the well.
Which would be terrible.
Yeah, that'd be pretty bad.
As much as this situation is very cliche for any clone episode, it's the whole which one's the real one situation. I still think it works well in this episode.
Yeah, I do agree, and they play it very well. It's played very well.
Oh yeah, it isn't done in a very typical...
You're gonna have to blast both of us.
Also, why is Celestia's cutie mark at the top of the library? It's on the ceiling.
Well, it's probably a pretty general symbol as well, considering Celestia's cutie mark is a stylized sun.
Clearly because Celestia's flank has been rubbing against the ceiling.
Or maybe it's because the library is white mana focused, and it works like tapping a plains card.
Stop it, Twilight. Just stop it, Twilight.
So we get a cut back to the citizens of Ponyville, who are all wondering, oh, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? And Pinkie shows up and she's like, hey, Twilight, I really gotta talk to you. And it's like, hey, I'm not gonna talk to any Twilight or to any Pinkie Pie who isn't the real Pinkie Pie. But I am the real Pinkie Pie. No, I'm the real Pinkie Pie. No, I'm Spartacus. No, I'm Spartacus.
I do find this moment quite beautiful in that for a few split moments, not even you, the viewer, knows who the real Pinkie Pie is. Not until she starts examining the parts of the other Pinkie Pies.
Do we ever know who the real Pinkie Pie is?
I would actually say the exact opposite. I felt that throughout this entire episode, we always knew who the real Pinkie Pie was, because the real Pinkie Pie is always, throughout the entirety of the episode, the one who isn't completely insane and always googly moogly, super excited, fun till my daddy took the T-Bird away.
Or do we? Perhaps that's just a mutated clone.
Clearly.
That ended up sadder than the rest.
Oh, yeah, sure. Like that's gonna fly.
You know, stranger things have happened.
So we got the hordes and hordes of Pinkie Pies, and the original is sad because she doesn't know how the issue's going to be fixed. And at this point, she's even doubting whether or not she's even real. To the point to where she's getting super duper depressed and just kind of slumping on a table. One of those little mushroom tables that are all around the place.
Toadstools.
Yeah, I wonder, maybe Equestria is kind of like the Morrowind of the world of ponies.
Toadstools, get it? Because they're stools.
I do have to bring up something a friend of mine actually said to me, in that, how is it that none of the main six managed to notice the depressed one was actually the real Pinkie Pie?
Well, and it's considering the depressed one is the one who also comes up with all of the plans to figure out who the real Pinkie Pie is.
And I actually had my own theory on this, in that they knew, but they wanted to actually have Pinkie Pie learn the lesson that they actually wanted Pinkie Pie to learn the lesson of the episode.
Are you saying that they're a bunch of jerks again, like in Mare-Duel?
I'm not saying they're a bunch of jerks, it's just a lesson isn't learned if you basically get it taught to you.
I think that would be a little too extreme, though, and considering the fact that the problem isn't just affecting her friends, it's affecting the entire village, I think they would have kind of had an obligation to end the Rampage as soon as possible, rather than to try and stretch it out to teach Pinkie Pie a lesson about responsibility.
I don't know, Bones.
In the end, they do contain all the Pinkie Pies in the town hall, containing the carnage. It is entirely possible at this point they do know, and they're just containing them to hold it off.
I don't know, Bones. I'd do something that extreme to teach you a lesson.
Yeah, but you're not exactly normal either there, Socksy.
No, I'm not. Neither is Pinkie.
Yeah, but she's not the one who's thinking up the plan now, is she?
Yes, she is. She totally is. She always is.
Are you sure that's the real one?
So, basically, they're tearing up everything. The depressed Pinkie tells Twilight exactly what she needs to know in order to figure out who the real Pinkie is, basically by giving them a test. And only the real Pinkie would have enough focus to complete the test, while all the other ones would be so distracted or unfocused by their main goal, which was to have fun, that they would wind up failing, and you could just blast them with the spell. So they corral all of the Pinkie Pies into town hall, and even go so far as to show that depressed original Pinkie Pie, and come on, if you didn't think that the depressed one was the original one, it's kind of, yeah.
It is quite blatantly obvious, yeah.
The depressed original one wasn't corralled with the others because she was moping on drawing frowny faces in the ground with her hooves.
And she just gets thrown onto the floor.
And so Rainbow Dash carries her into the town hall, all mopey and sad. Just kind of throws her down, yeah.
Like a sack of flour.
A sack of Madame the Flower.
Yes, exactly.
But when any of the Pinkies decide to be distracted by whatever happens, we find out that Twilight blasts them with this spell. And I have to bring up what I brought up at the very start of the episode review, in that the magic effects have improved greatly. I think the spiral effect as it travels back to the spring is very well done.
Oh, I agree. The animation is definitely top-notch, and like I said before, while something kind of seemed odd to me, I think it's because of just how much it's progressed. It's like I'm not quite used to it, seeing it. It's really starkly. It's really.
It's come a long way since.
Good stuff, man. It's good animation. It's progressed. It's come a long way since the very beginning portion.
I will say, from episode to episode, you don't notice it as well, because it is subtle changes. But go back and watch a Season 1 episode, and then compare it to a Season 3 episode, you will notice the changes.
Exactly.
The scenery is a lot more detailed, too.
Exactly.
That I've noticed. Things are more detailed, there's more, bloom effects, more lighting effects, all that.
Well, and I just recently watched one of the Season 1 episodes, and by comparison, I gotta say that, yeah, it's come leaps and bounds, and I'm sure that people more animation inclined and with better knowledge and more experience than I could point out where all the flaws and stuff like that are. But I mean, like, if you guys remember, there was a big video compiled not too long ago, back when during the in-between of Season 1 and 2, where they compiled all of the animation errors and flubs of Season 1. And while I'm sure there are probably a couple here and there in the later seasons as well, I think that the animators have probably come a long way, and we probably won't see as much of that sort of thing as we did in Season 1.
Well, you know what they say, practice is perfect.
I found it incredibly disturbing the way she teleported the Pinkie Pies back into the well.
Yeah, how they kind of like expand and inflate and then shrink back into energy. And
it's like, wow, Twilight, one of those could be your friend.
It looks really violent.
But I don't think Twilight can really control the effects of the spell, just what it does.
Yeah, so the reaction probably isn't her fault. It's just kind of a volatile sort of thing.
But they all look like her friend.
But yes, this setup provides the footing to one of the greatest jokes I've seen throughout the series, which is actually a reference to Generation 1, in which one of the Pinkie Pie clones manages to make an original Pinkie Pie face.
That caught me completely off guard. I was like, what?
Yes, that comes later. You're jumping ahead of us. So the test that Twilight tells them they're going to do after she manages to get them all to sit is that they're going to be tested on something that's completely not fun, to basically test their focus and prove which one is the real Pinkie Pie. And that test is watching paint dry. Oh my gosh, I was cracking up when they revealed that, because that would be torture, man. That would be torture.
It is funny that even at the end, well, towards the end, Rainbow Dash proves that even she can't take it and does anything to get the Pinkie Pies to react.
Yep. And so Spike grabs his popcorn and everybody sits down to watch everybody watching the paint dry. And one by one, the Pinkie Pies, exhibiting their OCD-ness, one by one they are eliminated as they're distracted and do various different things. Like a few of them spy the frorange. And they're like, hey, is that a frog crossed with an orange? That's cool. And they get blasted. Another one says, hey, look what I can do with my hooves. And using air flown into her hoof, turns her hoof into a hand.
A hand with 4 fingers.
And thus spawned 1001 Lyra fanfics.
With 4 fingers. And then another one says, hey, I bet you can't make a face as crazy as this. And it's the Generation 1 pony face.
And at that point, I kind of screamed and recoiled and flew away from my computer.
And again, I keeled over laughing with that one.
I was not expecting that at all. That was definitely not anywhere near my expectations for that.
And so, by the end of it all, one by one, the clones are eliminated, and the real Pinkie Pie is finally left standing all by her lonesome. And basically, she just admits, I couldn't fail the test because I care too much about my friends to wind up being zapped into the mirror pool. So the lesson we take away from this episode by the end is that while you might love having fun with your friends, and having fun is a great thing, sometimes you may have to make a difficult choice between some friends and who you're going to hang out with and when. And at the end of the episode ends with all of Pinkie's friends saying, hey, let's go and do something and have some fun. She's like, hey, you know what I want to do right now? And she just plops down and takes a nap.
Let's all do something away from each other at the same time on purpose.
I will say, I'm glad the theme that the main 6, not just Twilight, Rise to Celestia, is prevalent in Season 3. I like that.
Yeah, I think that it's really good that it's prevalent.
I don't know. I'd say it's a bit too early to say that.
Well, no, I don't know if it's necessarily too early, but I do think that it's nice that they're still keeping at least maybe 1 or 2 Letter to Celestia episodes. Because it would have been disappointing to see that leave the show entirely. While we're definitely probably going to be stepping further away from that as the season goes on, I think, especially as we start to run out of friendship lessons to give.
Can you run out of friendship lessons? But friendship is forever.
Well, friendship may last forever, but there's only a limited number of things. It's just like the evil overlord's list. You can label as many things as you want. The list may be huge, but there is a limited number of ways in which you can keep yourself from being, screwing up at some point. So, that was Season 3, Episode 3, Too Many Pinkie Pies. So, let's go ahead and grade this scale of 1 to 5, starting with you, Crescendo. What is your rating for this episode?
I think we can rate it out of Pinkie Pies for this episode. And for this episode, I'd have to give it 6 Pinkie Pies out of 5.
You're going over the number, huh? This episode was better than perfect to you.
Of course, it's a Pinkie Pie episode. I have to go over. But this episode has been one of the best examples of improvements over the season. Every aspect of the show has improved in this episode, in my eyes. The animation is just beautiful. It's one of the things that has always drawn me to this show, along with the music. It's the music is something that's meant to be subtle, but it still makes an impact, and I think it does that well. And the humor, dear God, the humor, I loved it. So yes, 6 Pinkie Pies out of 5.
Okay.
I'm going to clone all of Crescendo's Pinkie Pies and give it 12 Pinkie Pies out of 5.
Why?
For all of the same reasons she stated, in addition to the Frorange.
In addition to the Frorange.
The Frorange and the... What kind of bird was that anyway? Is that a blue jay?
Yeah, it looks like a blue jay to me.
It's an orange jay now.
Okay, so we've got a 6 out of 5 and a 12 out of 5. This is just gonna make mine sound silly. I probably I don't really know whether or not I want to give this a perfect score or not. Mostly just because of the fact that we got a little bit of everybody, and that's good. But I really can't say that there are any flaws, not that I can point out immediately. And the biggest flaw that I would say with this episode is more from a personal standpoint and related to the show as a whole, in that we've gotten a lot of Pinkie Pie focus episodes, and oftentimes when there's a song or there's something else like that, it's usually Pinkie Pie who's singing it. And I'm one of those members of the fandom who really thinks that as far as character focus goes, we know a lot about Pinkie Pie. We know a lot about her. We know a lot about what makes her tick, and she has had a lot of development already before this episode. And I think that time would be better spent on characters who have not had a lot of development, like Applejack, who is practically barely a main character considering everything, because she's only had like the one she had 2 focus episodes with Applebuck season and the last roundup, but they were both basically showcasing the same thing, that Applejack is stubborn and more often than not tended to kind of go against the grain and go against the character anyways, with her not openly lying, but at the same time not being wholly honest either, and not telling the whole truth, and keeping secrets and hiding things. And I think that there should be more time given to those things. But as far as the episode itself goes, from a raw technical standpoint, from a writing standpoint, from all of those other aspects, from the character development and the showcasing, this episode is probably I'm going to give it a straight up 5 out of 5. It is an episode that it felt like it really harkens back to the old days of Looney Tunes, and that you usually get that with Pinkie Pie focus episodes. It was really, really energetic, really fun, really silly, but at the same time, it was pushing towards an end lesson, and it did really well to develop the character of Pinkie Pie. She's learning even more responsibility. You'd think she'd know a little bit more than she does by now, considering she's had to babysit the Cake's children. She's had to learn to better trust in her friends after Party of One, and so on and so forth. But all things considered, I think it did well. We got little showcases of all of the other characters. Twilight, we got Spike, we got Rarity, Applejack, Rainbow Dash, Fluttershy. We got some stuff from the background ponies, and we're learning more about the characters. And I hope that we're going to see more of this in the future, dealing with more characters. Once again, I'm going to reiterate, I really, really want to see some more development with Applejack. But as far as this episode goes, really fun, really energetic, great writing. Big props to Dave Polsky from taking something that's an idea that has been done in a million different ways across a million different genres of media and entertainment, and figuring out some new ways to spin the idea. And 5 out of 5. This is a perfect episode. Great to just sit around, and it's definitely going to be one that I rewatch.
I think an important question that needs to be asked, there's 2 of them actually, but the first one is, what happened to the Orange Jay? We never see it again. And obviously Twilight didn't change them back, because that orange was still there. So what is it doing? And the second question is, what is Pinkie's plan in the end? It's obvious that she orchestrated this entire episode. She orchestrated it all from the start to further some goal. But what is that goal?
This was just another example of her gypsy magic.
Now you're being paranoid. Oh, but I will also add, too, since I forgot to state it earlier, is that they make sure that the the wellspring won't be accessed again by covering it with a big old rock. But the rock isn't necessarily a permanent solution, so maybe we'll see it again sometime in the future. Maybe not. But as far as everything goes, you heard it from us. This is straight up a perfect episode, 5 out of 5. This is going to be one to show your friends. This is going to be one that you'll probably wind up rewatching. Lots of fun, lots of energy, good lesson by the end of it. And that just about does it for our episode review. So catch us over at everfree.net here on Everfree Network under EFR Presents. I've been your host, Brushin Bones.
I'm Crescendo.
And I'm Socksy.
And we will join you next time here on Everfree Network.